So this presentation is a continuation of the presentation from Ircam made by Jerom on live electronic music. I will speak on acousmatic music. To summarize, INA makes musical production, acousmatic production, since now 60 years. This music is very specific, is mainly based on the acousmatic paradigm, which is that you do all the music, the composers build its own music in the studio and put this on a data file, on audio files, and then the music is finished. Usually it's performed on the radio programmer or for concert on a loudspeaker orchestra. Also, the acousmatic music can be used to some other purpose like mixed media radio programmers. Our main problem is not to preserve the audio files. Everybody knows how to do this, and we'll see which are our main problem in the Caspar project. Our problem is that with the times, the sound quality is not good enough anymore. Like for the old movie you watch, it's in black and white with no sounds, and you would like to have some better version 20, 30 years later. First, I want to go back to the comparison between our musical domain and the Ircam domain. There might be some confusion, as usual, also because we use their server, the Musticaspar server. You might think that we do exactly the same, so I want to resume this a little. Acousmatic music is made on recorded sounds and sound transformation. And the composers record this on a tape or nowadays on audio files. Then he goes to the studio to do a mixing session, or days of mixing session, to produce the final audio music, audio files. And then, with your fixed media, stereo track or multi-tracks, we have sometimes, quite a lot in France, not so much in other countries, we have loudspeakers concerts. On the Ircam context, which is quite more recent because it's live electronic music, you have sound synthesis, sound transformation algorithm, you produce this, and sometimes, of course, you use also recorded sounds. So things are mixed, but the intention is to do real-time music. Of course, you need for that musician, instruments, and also the score. And before the Caspar project and the Musticaspar project, I would say, what was really preserved was the score, because the publisher always thinks that the score is the music, which is, of course, absolutely not the case in live electronic music. Then from this, you go to concert where you have a live electronic performance, of course, with an instrumentist or musician, with the electronic part here, which is a live mixing of the audio, the live electronic sound transformation, and all this stuff. So here you have mainly performances versus at INA, we have a concert which is more likely like a sound projection, like also a movie projection. Okay, so back to our INA context. What we usually archive is the final audio tapes here, final audio works, and sometimes new version, and also the publication. The rest is used by composers. Usually the composer has a source, original source material at home, and documentation, it's in another place. And it's so what we archive at the moment, and what the Caspar project and preservation should bring to us is to preserve and to archive all what is in red. That is, of course, the original works, but also declension of this, new technology, equipment, description, performing conditions, and of course, the related sources like the master mixing session, which is something that was archived 20, 30 years ago in the analog times, but not anymore in the digital times. It should be easier, and nobody does it. So the goal of our preservation there is, of course, to reperform the work, but this is not the hardest part, and because we are used to it. Now we have added documenting the performances condition, because it's something which is absolutely implicit in France. Since 50 years, we do loudspeaker orchestra. People know that we do loudspeaker orchestra, and nothing describes how it is, the condition, what you hope to get, what you want, what you get really. And there was absolutely nothing. So we started to do, for example, the history of the loudspeaker orchestra in France, and then also in England. And we hope that we will have, in a few months or few years, enough material so that people could understand, even if this kind of concert disappeared, what was the intention and what it was designed for, what was our purpose. We want also this really important step, which is to make adaptation revision with our digital mixing session. For that, we have to preserve this session, and as this mixing session are using a main core software, which is usually a software from the market, we have exactly the same problem than with Max MSP. For Ircam, we need also to describe, to preserve all the way we have the mixing session for each piece. Of course, we need also documentation on this, and we need also to manage the rights, because if you want to do a new version or new rendering really later, after the composition has been done, even if the composer is dead, you need, of course, to manage the right. Can you do something? Can you enhance a piece 20, 30 years after this creation? And even if the composer, some of the participants are dead, which is a real right aspect, which is really important. So, just our data sets, of course, a whole set of files, the final works and inclusion, which are usually audio files, sometimes with also movies. The final mixing session, which is a lot of files and a lot of steps during times. If possible, the sketches and intermediate step, some of the composers have accepted to give us the sketches. And the sketches, you need also to analyze them and to run it for musicologists. You need also the host software, like the mixing software. And of course, all documentation related to the composition, which is absolutely important for the authenticity and sometimes for the provenance. Data types are quite a lot of data types, say 50 to 60 data types, but with different aspects. The more important is the core software and the mixing file system, which is usually a proprietary system. There's a few ways to migrate from one system to another, and what we are using in the Caspar project, but this is not perfect. Okay, here is an aspect of concert. You have the rehearsal of the concert installation of the loudspeaker. On the left, you have the composer, previously in his studio, in our studio, composing the piece, which produce here a mixing session with a lot of audio files, usually reduced here to 16 or 8 tracks, which are the sound files that people listen on the concert. And at the end of the concert, we have a diagram just of the loudspeaker places in the concert hall. That's the minimum. I'm asking now, for example, we could, there is a sound projection, which is made here with a mixing desk live. We could record this, because it's now a digital mixing desk, and they don't want so much. The technician, also the composer, saying that yes, but it depends, it's live, it depends on how many people you have here, and also the response. It sounds on loudspeaker, so the music is fixed, it's finished, but you still have a response in the concert hall, so you will speak louder or not, which is the main response. For example, to cover. If people are noisy, you will speak louder. So you will change also the way you listen to your music. So back to our files. I take this example for distance liquid from Hans Tuchko. The amount is about 1,000 files. Of the main we use is 10 different types: fade files, audio files, mixing session, and so on. And I've seen that for all the pieces we have put in the 5 pieces we have finished to put on the Musticaspar server, it's quite, for 4 of them, it's exactly the same amount of files. So nobody can manage and control 1,000 files. That's why we have worked with the CNRS team. And CNRS team has built a human GUI, a human interface, to organize and describe the relationship between each kind of object, category of object. And we have decided with them a terminology for the acousmatic, all the types of data we use. And with this terminology, they have built for us, but also for Scient and for leads, a different set of representation. So here, it's, of course, it's just a slide where you can here describe all categories of data. Usually, each object contains not only one file, but a set of files. So we have a problem to pass this to the server. And you can construct all the relationship between the different objects, which is something that a normal data holder can do. And we have here also the attribute of each object. Here is a 8-track master, and you can say that it's a work. You have, of course, an ID system. You have also a name, version, and here you see it's only the attribute. You can also now have the rights, the authenticity protocol, or just attribute on this. And from this, we can export an ontology on RDF system to the true repository, which is what we chose, which is to contribute with the Musticaspar server from Ircam. So, one aspect, rights management, because we will have then later a demonstration of that. We have in the new last version of the interface, which name is now Cyclops, we have a provenance tracking, which is also important for our right management. You need to know, if you have an object, who made this object and the purpose. So we have attribute of rights, attribution. For example, you know if it's a composer, a performer, a commissioner, the very rough description. And then we have discussed with MetaWare team some protocol to check the rights description in the Caspar. The one was the change in some kind of rights. That is, imagine that some interpret that you can also have in acousmatic music, the person who is on the mixing desk and then does a sound projection, has now new right, related right, because he's considered as an artist. You have to inject this new information in the system, and that's what the right team from MetaWare has made. And we have also tested another second protocol with a change of duration of rights. In the last version of the Cyclops from the CNRS team, we have now a visualization of provenance when you check some object and you ask here to show the provenance. You have all, which is red here, all the cycle of the provenance to check if you have a provenance to this object and if you understand it really well. You can also have the context and, of course, some things like delete elements or other features. So, back to the inner testbed, one preservation aspect which is important for us, the one we will see later. The one is just to preserve the final works in its declension, and for that to control the right attribution. A second key aspect is preservation of the final mixing session. And the last aspect which is not completely finished now. It's preservation of the description of the performance condition. So I just show this one here, which is a mixing scenario, the case scenario of the mixing software. Imagine that your mixing software is not anymore available. You need to, if you want to run again the mixing session, you need to find a solution. This solution, we have three strategies. I will show you just one strategy, which is to use one kind of exchange standard of files, which is called OMF or AAF. You will run this on a new mixing software, comparing to the original work, decide if the result is enough or not, then correcting and documenting all the stuff. So I just show you here. You have here the original audio mixing session file. Here is the mixing software and the audio rendering. And so you have a warning that the mixing software you use is not anymore available. The strategy one here, we also have two other strategies we have tested, but this one, you, through OMF export of files, you run a new mixing session file with a new mixing software, and you have a new rendering that you compare to the original. So if I take to the, of course, it's a human solution. Jerom sometimes show automatic replacement of some component from MaxMSP to pure data. It's not possible at our level. It's something you have to do in a studio, which takes days, of course. We have tested this, and we will finish in 2 weeks on one piece only, because it takes time. It's a piece from Daniel Terigi. I just show the steps on this. So you have a work and its component and parts on the Musticaspar server. You have this notification of availability of the core mixing, which is lost. It's exactly the same steps, of course, that Jerom has shown. Then you have your human solution, which is file migration in the studio. And then you check the result. So you have an authenticity protocol asking to the composers or other persons if they agree with the result. And then you ingest the new version in the repository. So to conclude our achievement, of course, we have at HINA a clone server of the Musticaspar server. We want also on this to have 1 or 2 pieces from Ircam, just to show to people the different type of data we are using. We have, of course, a methodology for representation information, which is not so hard as the one from MaxMSP. We have this CDOC-CRM acousmatic terminology and representation. And we are now documenting the performances condition. And we have quite finished to describe 5 pieces of composers. We want also to continue this work after September. That's true, we will do it at HINA. The one which is started now is to collect a new pieces from Trevor Richard. Trevor Richard asked to, he's an English composer, asked to people from the UK to help him to archive all his pieces, which are analog or digital on air data or 8-track data. And so he said, it's time for me to archive everything. And they proposed him to have one of these pieces fully described on the Musticaspar server, which is made by Michael Gat, who was my collaborator here, but he's back on UK now, and he will work on this piece for 2-3 months. We have also a publisher who asked us to help him to make one piece from Hugues Dufour, Statuette for Orchestra and Synthesizer. So it's close from the piece from Diadem. The same kind of problems. It was played with electronic synthesizer, and nobody can play them now. And we are just starting to work on this. it's not only acousmatic music, but we decided to do in two ways. One is to sample all the sounds, which is the job of our studio team, and I propose to do the same, to do a modelization for the Musticaspar server. We also are making now a guideline for best practice for the studio, because as for Ircam, we see there's a lack of description of what people do, of description of files, even of the types of the software they are using, the version. Nobody writes this. They say, it's audio files, there's no problem. And 2 years after, nobody can run, of course, the things. We want also to have an external access of this server, which is not so easy because we rely on the administration at INA, and the computer people are not always, they want to do it, but it takes years and years. We need this for demo, and we want also to host a few pieces of other composers from other countries, which I think it's interesting. On the long term, we have this new project with Ircam, and we have also our internal database, which is acousmaline. We have now again the hand of that, and we want to make a bridge between the acousmaline, which has all the 1,500 pieces on it, or supposed to be on it, but just as a repository, and the best pieces we have, and we want to describe and to preserve on the Musticaspar server. And the last wish would be to open the Musticaspar server to the community, to proposing, but I need the agreement to Ircam for that, proposing them to try to put one of the best pieces on this, to see if they understand, if you can explain, if we can explain them all the problem of preservation, of OES, of Caspar and Musticaspar, and then they can try to put one piece on this. It's a big challenge for long term. Conclusion, the fact that now we are preserving, or starting preserving the mixing session, will allow us to migrate the mixing session on new software if necessary, for a few pieces, of course, to produce new rendering, like on the cinema movies. You want to have a new version of a very old movie, not so old, you do a new rendering on a new system. And also to give access to musicologists to our sources, if we have, for example, the sketches, because the sketches, you can only analyze them in running them on the software, of course. If not, it's just audio file. You don't know anything about that. That's all.